Hey y'all, Craig. Hope you're enjoying your alternate reality. Here we are, July 2020, South Carolina. It's hot. That's normal. That's about the only thing that is normal this year. It's one of the craziest years. You expect this in an election year, certainly, especially a presidential election year, where everything's binary, everything's this side or that side, which is so weird because that's not what anyone is, right? We're all a mix of this side and that side, kind of a gray area. I bet if you really thought about it, there's very few people outside of the center, outside of that gray area, because we all have to compromise to live, right? I mean, we don't agree with everyone we're around, even sometimes our own family members, right? So we compromise. That's how it is. And in America, we have the right to have opinions that aren't popular. We have the First Amendment that protects our speech. And that is complicated because sometimes it allows people to say things that offend you and offend a lot of people. You know, some crazy white supremacist kook, no one's going to agree with that guy except for maybe 10 people, but he can stand out there and yell and scream and carry on. And same with some radical communist, they can stand out there and yell and scream and carry on. But in America, that's your right. Not the case in most of the world, at least not to the extent it is. It's not protected elsewhere, let's say that. But I've noticed for the last 3.5 years or so, it's become very difficult to speak out if you're of a certain ideology, let's say. If you're a Trump supporter. I am a Trump supporter. Have been since I heard. When he came down the escalator, right? And I had no interest in that man before he ran. I really did. I had his book. I didn't read it. He was a loudmouth guy from Queens. And, he had TV shows and all that stuff. I didn't watch him. I wasn't interested. It just wasn't my thing. So why was I interested in Trump when he decided to run? Well, because I guess same reason I voted for Perot. So call me nuts, but I believed the same thing then as I do now. Running the country is just like running a very, very large business. And there's really only a basket load of people who are good at doing stuff like that. It's something of that level and that complexity. It just takes a very special person to do it. And I've tried. I've owned several businesses, and some, nothing huge, but some pretty good size, with a few hundred employees. It's very hard, and it's easy to be distracted, and it's really more likely that you'll fail than you'll succeed to run a business. So I always felt what this country needs is somebody that knew how to run a business, a big business, that had that level of charisma, balls that big, all of that stuff, so that we could finally straighten things out. Because as a guy who owns businesses, you understand things. You understand things a little bit more than people who don't. And I only mean in terms of management and what it takes and how difficult it is to get people to that middle gray area, because sometimes people get way out of sorts. But the interesting thing is I found that if you give them enough time to talk back and forth, they agree on almost everything. It might be one little thing, and that's usually easy to take care of. But somebody has to get people to start talking so they can understand the commonalities. So that's what I'm attempting to do right here, right now, is I would like to appeal to those friends of mine who have sort of written me off because I'm a Trump supporter. And And certainly, I have a lot of liberal friends and they tolerate this stuff. But my progressive friends do not. And that's really the point I want to make. Because when we're talking about an election year, and this one being unlike any other, we're also talking about a different lineup. It's always been Republican, Democrat. And it is again, but it isn't. The Democrat Party, the liberal Democrat Party, has been eaten. And it is now a Marxist party. It is. Look at where the power is right now. Is it in the moderates? Did you even know that there used to be conservative Democrats? There were. I mean, what is a conservative? A conservative is nothing but somebody that believes that the original Constitution, Bill of Rights, should be conserved. We don't want to break outside of the basic instructions in the agreement that we have with our founding documents. That's what a conservative is. It's not a Republican. Matter of fact, there are very few conservatives left in the Republican Party. And then, what's progressive? Well, a progressive is somebody that wants to progress beyond that framework. Okay? And that was anticipated by the founders. And it's always been understood that those forces would be out there. And they've been out there since the beginning. And they have transformed where we began into what we are now, which is a country that has a lot of socialist organizations. Things that sort of socialist, right? But they'll tell you, it's fire departments or school systems or this and that. Well, these are examples, it's collectively we all fund it, and so it's socialism because that's what socialism does. It's different. But I'll play along. So let's take a look at those. Let's look at education. Has it improved? Well, federal government got involved in education when I was going to school, back in the 60s and 70s. I was born in 63. And those who know me know that, especially when it comes to typing things out, and that's part of the reason I'm speaking to a camera, I make a lot of spelling mistakes, a lot of grammatical mistakes, because I didn't really learn that part. We were taught through like workbooks and pre-test, post-test kind of thing, and a teacher would sit at a desk and have an answer key. And, I went through a lot of experimental education. And chances are most of you guys have gone through the same. I've got 2 kids in their 20s now. They went through public school education also. And I can see, I've looked at the textbooks. I can see what the education that they received gave them. And it's not nearly as well-rounded as the education I got, and even though my education sort of lacked. So, if federal government got involved to improve education, it has not resulted in an improvement. Because education is not writ large. It's one of those things, it's like what you plan on doing with your life, where you live, all of that stuff. What you need to know is a little bit different. I'm in South Carolina. The things that are important to us here in South Carolina are different than the things that are important to people in Southern California. They just are. We live in the same country, but we're different, from place to place. We just are. And so our needs are different, and the jobs available to us would be different. So education should take that into account, right? It should look at you where you are and say, well, this is how we need to educate these people. Now, I'm not saying there's basic fundamentals, obviously. So you got to cover, these things. People should be literate, right? Once you graduate from school, you should be literate. If you looked at the percentages, there's a lot of people who graduate, leave high school that are illiterate. How about civics? I mean, this is a spectacular country, but it's complicated. It was based on a constitution and Bill of Rights and a bunch of laws. So that's important, right? You should be learning that stuff in school. People aren't learning that in school. They aren't even learning real history. They're learning social studies, which is an interpretation of history. They're basically getting an opinion piece on history. And that's not how it works. Give people all the bits and pieces, the ugly pieces as well as the good. Let them draw their own conclusions. But the conclusions that people are led to believe at this point seem to have nothing to do with being patriotic. They seem to have a lot to do with creating a separation. Us, them. You believe this, they believe that. You can't trust them. There's not a lot of gray there. So we're getting away from our core principles, I believe, in almost everything we do. But certainly the worst example would be the federal government. Over 2 million people, and that's not including the military. What do you imagine 2 million people are doing in the federal government? And remember, we have state governments and we got local governments. So we've got 3 tiers of people working supposedly for us. To do what? To make sure we don't have potholes. Okay, we pretty much, I don't care where you are, you probably got a lot of potholes. Making sure we're safe. Have you seen the news recently? Defund the police. What in the world is that all about? Just all the things that we're taught to expect, or I guess not taught anymore to expect, out of America has been swept and replaced with like, well, you should be upset about this, upset about that. They don't suggest how to fix it. They just want you to be upset. And that's not the government's job. The government's job, they're supposed to be working for us. Right? Half of the population votes, give or take, in a presidential election. About half the population pays federal taxes. Not always the same group, but it's just interesting. Participation is 50-50. I mean, that's really surprising to me. People who work inside the government are aware of this. Probably more so than even the pollsters, because they depend on this to happen. What am I talking about? 2 million people were not voted in. Okay? We vote for a handful of people. Chances are pretty good that when you go into a vote for a president, you know who you want as president, vice president. You might know a couple of offices that are on there, but then chances are pretty good that as you go through the list, go through the ballot, so I don't really know who these people are for, I don't know, the coroner or agricultural, or I don't know, this guy's name sounds familiar. Done, right? But that has consequences. What happens is, let's say you wanted to change things a lot. You're going to get nothing but resistance if you rush right in and say, I want to change everything. And people are going to be, whoa, no. But you want to change things. How do you go about it? Well, the best way to do it is change a little at a time. A little tweak. Eventually, you've turned the screw a whole revolution. So that's what's been going on. Those people that you weren't really paying attention to when you voted, or maybe, I've seen that sign, I've heard the name, whatever. But you haven't really given it much thought, not much research. Those people were put into these odd positions because there was a lot of money behind them. You might not even be aware of it. But people were installed in positions. You voted for people that you didn't know anything about, other than maybe a name, seeing a bunch of signs or something. And these people have taken those positions and then filled their cabinets, the people who work for them directly, with people who think the same way as they do, however that might be. But what's happened in the last several decades is we've slowly replaced the typical sort of gray area Americans that worked inside government with people who are very opinionated in one direction. And that's the progressives. The progressives have been slowly filling the ranks of government. But in more ways than just filling the unelected ranks. Even when you vote for a Republican, chances are pretty good you're going to get a progressive. I would argue that both Bushes were progressive. That we've been on a progressive bend ever since George took over from Reagan. New World Order. What do you think that was about? One world order. Very progressive. Why was Junior W so passive? Remember, he'd get abused all the time, even after he left the office. He had nothing to say. I suspect that all along this agenda has been pushed slowly but deliberately throughout the offices. It finally got to a point where we elected Barack Obama, a fellow who has a really unusual background. No experience running a large company or any large organization. He was a community organizer. What is that? Well, those are to simplify, those are guys that go around inside of communities, specific kinds of communities, and educate people on what the government can do for them. I'm going to modify that a little bit by saying educate them on what they can do to the government. You can get a free phone. You get rid of that fellow that you're with, you can get better support with those kids, illegitimate kids. You can be a single mom and receive even more benefit. Stuff like that. It's people on the surface that seem to be doing a real favor for communities, but if you really dig down deep, what you see is they're affecting communities at the bottom level. In other words, starting to change the way people perceive their government. Where government used to be about, it works for us, the country is ours, it's sort of turned into, we're working for the government, and the government works for us in that it'll give us the things we need when it agrees that we need it. So that's been the bend, right? So when Obama was elected, a lot of people were very concerned because this guy doesn't have any management experience. What's he ever done? What's he ever run? Nothing. He hasn't even passed any major laws. I don't even know if he sponsored any major. I don't think he did. Regardless, this is the guy they decide they want as a president. It'll be the first black president. Okay, but is that the most important criteria? Well, evidently. So he was elected, and it became obvious after a while that his main job was to go out there and press the flesh, raise money, go golfing with a bunch of celebrities, do huge fundraisers all over the country while other people ran the country. Now, I would say that during W's term, there were a lot of people running things for him as well. Clinton, etc. But although the Clintons are pretty hands-on. But in Obama's case, you had Valerie Jarrett, who's still with them all the time. It's the weirdest thing. But Valerie Jarrett was making a lot of executive level decisions. So maybe we had our first woman president right there. But there were a bunch of people. And that's what you get with progressives is, their whole mindset is we're a collective, and eventually it will be one big collective. Not that we're one big happy family. It means that we're a collective of sheep, and we're telling you sheep what to do. That's what it really means. They want to get beyond the point where they have to deal with elections and all this nonsense that they don't like. It's hard to convince people to vote for you when you're selling them a chipped up piece of wood, you know. But they've convinced people that, well, if you vote for us, we're going to bring you all kinds of goodies and things are going to be easier for you. They never deliver, but people continue to vote for them. So here we are anyway, through all that. We've got progressives who work as a huge collective, working their way up through. Obama said right at the beginning of his presidency, or maybe it was even before, he said he was setting out to fundamentally transform the nation. Now think about that. What does that mean? I think you got to take that at face value. But again, that's what these folks have been trying to do all along. Fundamentally change us, get us away from that Constitution, go to the next thing, their version of the Constitution. So, when Trump won, that disappointed a lot of people. Remember, they thought maybe Jeb would win, or Hillary. Either way, it's the same thing. I mean, it's just like, you know, well, okay, example, McCain. Okay, that was our nominee, right, for the Republicans. Look what happened with him. Or Mitt Romney. Look what happened to him. These guys, rhino would be the polite way to put it, okay? These guys are flat out progressives. I mean, you can see it now. And these are the guys we nominated to run. And I say we, I'm not actually a Republican, I'm an independent, but for right now, I'm feeling very Republican. So, there was a plan. Obama took it much farther because, you know, you couldn't really criticize him. He was kind of cloaked in I'm the first black president, and there were a lot of things that sort of gave him a force field, right? And the press certainly wasn't going to say anything negative about Obama because that's, I mean, they're all in collusion. We know that at this point. They're all doing the same thing. If you see some big article come out, it's funny. You can scroll through Google or whichever, and you'll see almost the identical headline coming from like 10 different news sources, right? I mean, it's the same article every time. So you can tell. I mean, these guys are all working together. So, okay, I'm trying to make this point. When we get to Trump, that messed things up for the progressives. They had been very careful about building this thing slowly and quietly, shaping education slowly, quietly, doing everything they can to control the conversation so that people start to see things their way. You know, little tweak at a time till you make that revolution, right? So at this point, you know, they had been in charge of education for, gosh, over 40 years. They have been shaping government for decades and installing all these people. I mean, it's grown so much. I mean, look at the TSA. My God, that's a huge organization that fundamentally violates our rights, but that's a different subject. You know, Trump comes along and he's saying, no, I want to put things back to the way they were. And the people that voted for him feel the same way. Like, yeah, can we get back to the America that was promised to us so that I've got a chance to succeed, get ahead? Because face it, under progressivism, you know, Obama himself said, remember, those jobs aren't coming back. This is the new normal. No, that's not what we were after. We were after, like, no, I want normal. I want to get back to where I've got potential to do well, whereas I'm not being limited, I'm not being regulated to death if I start a business. I don't have to fight competitors who are on the buddy list of the politicians. All I want to get back to a fair, level playing field, and that's why Trump was elected. Really, it was just like, no, a bunch of us have recognized what was happening. We wanted things to go back. So of course that made people upset. The progressives very upset because they had worked long and hard to push this thing along. So here we are, another election year. Trump wants to be reelected. I'd like to see him reelected. And, of course, the progressives very much want him to go away. And everybody like him. So, when I say an alternate reality, like I started off with, I mean it. I mean, here we are. I mean, look at this year. And you start off with what? They're trying to impeach the president over, what is it, Ukraine, I think, right? And it's like they had the phone call, they had everything there. You could look at it and say, oh, there's nothing wrong with this. Oh, yeah, there's everything wrong with it. And before that was the whole Russian collusion thing, which was absurd at face value. Stormy Daniels. I mean, look at all of these things. They just keep throwing in his way. I just one after another. Oh, and just everybody's got to hate Trump. And oh, would you listen to this? I've never heard so many, I mean, outright lies. Yes, lies. And, you know, the funny thing is, while all this has been going on, people have been taking notes. And serious-minded people have looked at this and said, I'm disgusted. I've got to put an end to this. And they're working behind the scenes to do just that. I think that once we get done with this Durham investigation, and it's being extended, I think for obvious reasons at this point. I think at this point, the idea is let's let these progressives do every crazy thing they can think of, because it's just making them look worse and worse. And it is. To anyone that's fair-minded, you look at the antics right now, it just seems insane. Why are we wasting so much time and effort chasing pure lies? I mean, it boggles the mind, but people want it. So, anyway, we go through all this mess, and then there's the virus. Okay, it's a virus. I mean, it's a bad one. I think I had it. My wife and I, we had every symptom back at the end of February. We haven't been tested. I don't see the point being tested. If I catch the virus, and I didn't already, then I'll catch it. But it was nasty. It was bad. It was like, for 2 days, I didn't want to leave a dark corner. Just leave me alone. Nobody even wanted to deal with me. But I got over it in a couple of days, the worst part. And then it probably took over a month. The fatigue and everything else, it was horrible. So I could see where, and I'm 56, and I'm A negative blood. So I'm exactly the kind of guy that this thing's looking to get into. But our two sons, who are in their 20s, they didn't seem to show any signs of it. Hopefully it just passed right through. But there it is, and it came out of China in the weirdest way, right? I mean, they wouldn't say anything about it, and then we kind of discover what's up, and they're trying to deny it, and it's really obvious. But meanwhile, Chinese people travel extensively, right? They've got industry all over the place, just like we do, and so they've been spreading it all over the place, and people in and out of there, millions of people all the time. Trump was smart to shut down flights out of there very early on in this thing, to very unpopular response. But you can't stop something like a virus like this. I mean, it's going to cover the world, and it has. It's covered the whole world. So how did everyone respond to it? Everyone sort of dealt with it in their own way. And some places are really just getting into it now. Some have been way through it. You look at like Italy. Italy's full of Chinese people, by the way. They work there. They fly in there, made in Italy, right? That's cachet, but it's made in Italy by a bunch of Chinese people who were flown in there on a constant basis, and a very old population. So they really got hit hard initially. So we get this Professor Ferguson, who has developed a model, which he's been developing for years, actually, and he's used several times in the past for pandemics. Wildly wrong, by the way. Almost every single time this guy has been like way out there as far as, oh man, we're all going to die. Well, but he makes an appearance yet again and basically tells everybody that will listen, we're all going to die. Panic ensues. Now, this Professor Ferguson is quite a piece of work. Matter of fact, he got fired recently from his position because he got sick from the COVID, and while he was in the quarantine, which he's the guy that basically told us, you got to quarantine if you're found to have this for 2 weeks. So he goes into quarantine. Now, I believe he got some of Parliament sick at the same time. But anyway, while he's in quarantine, he's floundering around with this married woman who is in an open marriage, and who's a progressive, by the way, and gets her sick, and is found out and is embarrassed by it all and gets fired. How typical, right? But anyway, we've adopted his model, which everyone that's tried to use it, it's funny. There's stuff on the internet about this, and they're just like, wow, this. It's written in Fortran. If you know computers, Fortran's ancient. It was old when I was in college in the 80s, you know, and it's a flaky program, so you got to make a lot of assumptions. It's junk science, but there it is, and he's convinced everybody for some reason. And of course, we have our own celebrity doctors who show up, and it's the doom and gloom show. We're all gonna die, basically. It's a virus. We've had some serious viruses come through. This one was bad. Is bad. But we shut everything down, right? To flatten the curve. And it was expensive for us, especially if you own a business, especially, you know, a business that you need customers, a lot of customers in there, but a smaller level, like a restaurant, a bar, a gym. You may still be out of business. Although if you have a big business like Walmart, come on in. But anyway, we shut down, and we were going to flatten the curve. The curve's pretty darn flat now. If you look at it, I mean, deaths are pretty low. They're dropping. We keep finding more people infected. That's no mystery. We knew that a lot of people would never even show symptoms, right? We knew this. I think, what is it, like 15% of people are going to get sick from it. And 5% of those are going to get like hospitalized sick. And then it's like 0.004 or something like that are going to die. That sucks. I worry about my mom, and I worry about some of my friends that aren't in great health. But that's a problem every year, right? I mean, we get viruses all the time. I mean, it was a bad flu year this year. You don't hear about it much, but it is, I don't know, maybe still. But we've flattened our curve. We've done what we were supposed to do. We knew that when we'd come back out from hiding, that it'd kind of come back up again because, hey, we're all being exposed again. But the idea was, not to overwhelm hospitals. And we did our part. So why are we shut down again, or shutting down, or especially here in the South, right? So, everyone ran down here. I mean, the second it was closed up north, there were cars from New York and New Jersey. I mean, there's been heavy traffic in town. I just saw a buddy of mine who's a cop, and he said it was like a 60% increase in May, right? It's not that we have everything open, but you can rent a beach house or whatever, come down here and hang out at the beach. But for whatever reason, people hauled butt, came down here, and they've been here ever since. They're still here. It's full around here. So what does that all mean? What does it boil down to? It's just like, well, yeah, we've been swimming in this stuff all along. Some have gotten sick. A lot of people got sick without being sick, right? Without showing the symptoms. We're getting along. So why are we shutting everything down again? Well, again, it's an election year. It's a weird year. And the progressives have chosen a man who is obviously, he's going senile. Which is weird. I mean, really, I think about this for a sec. The progressives have not only, they've pushed one lie after another over, Russian collusion to Stormy Daniels to, all this stuff to try to make Trump look bad. But on top of it, they're lying about their candidate and his abilities, all these things. And it's overwhelming. It's like, how can anyone even listen to these people? But they do. The poll numbers seem to indicate that, hey, he's actually even leading. Bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. But it's an election year. Nothing makes sense election years. But folks, the progressives have been flat out lying. The press that sides with them has been flat out lying. And we've all now been forced to pull back yet again, put masks on, hide. I'm not doing it. I'm going to avoid places that require me to wear a mask. I understand, please. If I'm around somebody that's older or nervous, I'll take precautions. I went to the dermatologist, which is a great thing that somebody my age that has blonde hair, well, formerly blonde hair, has to do. I get hunks of skin yanked off me all the time. So I go in there last week. I had to wear a mask because it's in a doctor's office. Okay, cool. I understand. And businesses, if they want you to wear a mask, that's their right. I understand. If they say, look, you don't come in here without a mask, that's the choice I'll make. And in my case, I'll probably say, oh, I'm not coming in. Because I don't like them. I don't like a mask. I don't. But you can't tell me I have to wear a mask, especially outside. I feel so bad for some of these poor folks. People work their ass off. It's hard. It's hot around here. Wearing a mask is uncomfortable. There's no way you can get enough air that way. I know there's like, oh, look, it does this. No, wear one for a while when you're working. It's awful. It's not fair. I understand for the people who are super worried, and there's, especially the progressives, it's like, oh, we're not going to wear masks, and it's important. I don't think they're being as noble as they're trying to convince us they are. I think they just really enjoy this. I really do. I think they really enjoy telling us what to do. But I'm not going to play along. I'm not going to wear the damn mask unless it's a situation that I agree to. Because I'm an American. I get to make those choices. You do too. And I get to choose who I vote for. Of course I'm going to vote for Trump. And I hope you do too. Even if you want to tell your friends you're going to vote for Joe, or I don't know who the independent guy is going to be this time, or Libertarian or whomever, but vote for Trump, please. Why? Not because of his personality, certainly. Because he's the only guy, or person I should say, that is trying to put us back to where we were, to give us the opportunities that we had. The progressives only want to take those opportunities away. They want to tell us what to do. Wear the mask. It's an election year. It's nuts. Doesn't have to be nuts if you don't allow it to be nuts. So join me in the not alternate universe. In the normal universe. And have a great day. Thanks for listening.